to order for July 1st, 2021. First item of business is to convene and review and approve the minutes of June 17th, 2021. But before we do that, let's have the committee introduce itself. I'm Senator Mark McDonald from Orange County, and I'm the chair. Senator Joe Benning is not with us today. And would the senators and representatives introduce themselves?
Senator Ginny Lyons representing Chittenden County.
Senator Chris Bray from Bristol representing Addison County, Huntington and Buell Score.
Representative Trevor Squirrel, representing Jericho and Underhill.
Representative Seth Baumgartz, representing Bennington 4.
Representative Mark Higley, representing Lowell, J, Westfield, Troy, and Eden.
Okay, first item of business to review and approve the minutes of June 17th, 2021. Senator Bray.
I move approval of the minutes of June 17th.
The motion has been to approve the minutes of June 17th. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay, and the minutes have been approved. First item on agenda is the Agency of Natural Resources Clean Water Service Provider rule that we postponed last week. The witnesses today are Chris Rotler, Department of Environmental Conservation, Caitlin Ellerman, Attorney General of the Department of Environmental Conservation, and Neil Kamen, Water Investment Division, Department of Environmental Conservation. I understand that Senator Bray has worked with both the Agriculture Department and the Agency of Natural Resources, and they have agreed on some changes that we are going to listen to forthwith. Senator Bray.
No, I was just going to fill us in. So thanks to the committee for providing the extra time, and for Agency of Agriculture, Agency of Natural Resources for meeting and just sorting out some details and coming back with a revised rule. Thank you.
Very good. Shall I go?
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick preface that when we met last time, we had proposed to use some stakeholder brokered agreements around one language insertion to fix an error that the agency had made, and there was a round agreement around that. And then we discussed some questions from Ledge Counsel, Dexter Cooper and O'Grady, and came up with some additional language to address those questions in the rule. As Senator Bray noted, we had a productive meeting also with Representative Sheldon. And so you have received the revised rule with red line and also clean copy, and I think a short memo that summarizes the changes. Caitlin, would you be able to roll through all of those?
Sure. So hopefully you're able to pull those up from our email of last week to Charlene. We had 4 general areas for proposed revisions summarized, starting with section 39-306I. This is the addition that Neil just alluded to, that sort of corrects something that we had left out in reaching our final draft proposal, and that is to include that the clean water service provider in general needs to procure services and products through a competitive process, except for entities that have gone through the pre-qualification process described in just the previous section 306H, and who had a clean water service or clean water project selected. Next section, and we can come back or feel free to interject if you have any questions along the way. Define terms based on Legislative Council's suggestions. We added 2 defined terms in the definitions section, one being fiscal sponsor which just clarifies concept of an entity that provides, financial fiduciary administrative services to another organization. And standard cost. And I believe standard cost, and Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, is standard cost included in the statute? We have sort of elaborated to include the list of costs of identification, design, and construction.
That is correct. Those pieces are all part of the standard cost, and when known, project development may be included, but because that can be very variable, we didn't specifically put that in the direction, but that is noted in the rule in a different.
Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets consultation. This was also flagged during our discussions and referred to during your last meeting with us. Specifically, we've inserted or proposed to insert language that limits that consultation to projects that are proposed on RAP farms. So that's the underlying language for both Section 39-304B, which is a list of the subject matter that will be contained within the Secretary's guidance. And then also 39-403D3, which lays out the project selection process. And then finally, the conflict of interest section. We had flagged during our last meeting with you the sort of use of pronouns in the disclosure and recusal sections. So for both the Clean Water Service Provider and the Basin Water Quality Council, basically individuals that are involved in decision-making must identify, disclose any potential conflict of interest and recuse themselves from decision-making on that conflict. And happy to take any questions. And I see that we have Laura DePietro and I believe Ryan Patch also on the line regarding any ag questions.
Senator Lyons.
A quick question on if the Clean Water Service Provider and the Agency of Agriculture disagree about whether or not a project qualifies as a clean water project, is there a dispute resolution process for that? Is that within the rules or is it elsewhere in procedures or guidance?
So this is Neil Cameron. I can start. The first section of the rule speaks to the content of the Secretary's guidance, including how the consultation shall take place. And so that would be an appropriate place for any discussion about, appeal or redress of a decision that seemed to a service provider to be inconsistent.
Okay, that's helpful. So it'll be in a separate guidance document.
Yep.
Thank you.
Senator Bray.
Yeah, so I had talked with Representative Higley a little bit, or email chatted in between meetings, and so I had just wanted to double check with him because we were both looking at some of the same definitions, and so I appreciate Ms. DePietro and Mr. Patch joining this meeting because we have a chance to all be together again and finally discuss it.
Representative Higley.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Senator Bray. I had also reached out or tried to reach out to Mr. Patch, and I also reached out to Stephen Collier, who I got an email from clarifying that, he was at a meeting as well on it, and it appears that, things have been worked out and that it also appears to satisfy Ledge Council. So, at this point, I believe that I'm satisfied with what's been worked on, and I would certainly appreciate hearing either from Ryan or Laura on this.
We, at this time, we do not have a motion. So is there further presentation?
Laura or Ryan, would you like to make any comment on sort of the subject of our conversations for Representative Higley?
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure there was space and permission here to forth ahead. So yeah, we've worked really well and collaboratively through this whole process, and I think it is outlined really well. Biggest thing that the Agency of Agriculture just wants to make sure is that there's good coordination on the ground, and we intend to be part of all the Basin Council meetings and participate in the process and make sure. And of course, any good project, we want it to go forward. We just want to make sure that if there's a regulatory oversight, another program already working on it, that we're all coordinated. So I think this fix works well. Our role is to look at farms that we regulate, essentially, and make a determination of whether it's a regulatory farm. So that's the role that's outlined.
Senator Bray.
So I, because of chairing natural, I got the Committee of Jurisdiction sign-off sheet, which I had not signed last time, but I, based on the meetings and the revisions and this conversation, so I wanted to let the committee know that I'd be signing off on behalf of the committee, and wanted to thank all the parties for really getting together and having a really productive meeting to sort details out. It was sort of a perfect LCAR experience from my side of the street. And so I would move that we approve Rule 20 P25.
With the text of the revisions.
Yes, thank you. As amended and presented today. Thank you.
Okay, it has been moved that the rule be approved with the text of the proposed amendments that were presented today and to us in the email in the last couple of days. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. And the rule has been approved. Thank the parties for the work during the last 2 weeks, and we will move on to the next items on the agenda. Thank you, Representative Higley, for participating with Senator Bray and taking the bumps out of that one. Okay. Next item is a series from, excuse me?
Thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, committee members and legislative council and Agency of Ag. Appreciate your time and effort on this.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a series of from the Agency of Human Services. We'll start with 21P05. The witnesses are Robin Chapman, staff attorney for the Department of Vermont Health and Access, Daniel Woko, policy analyst, Agency of Human Services. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And Sean Sheehan, senior policy and implementation analyst for the Department of Vermont Health Access. These witnesses will be testifying on the series of rules from the same agency, and we will not repeat them each time. But the first one, the first 21P05 Agency of Human Services is up for discussion at this time. Robin Chapman.
Yep. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time today to review the health benefits eligibility and enrollment rule, what we call HBEE. We're presenting this rule on behalf of the Agency of Human Services through the Department of Vermont Health Access. Essentially, the HBEE rule establishes eligibility and enrollment for Medicaid, as well as for qualified health plan insurance coverage through Vermont Health Connect. We started HBE rulemaking back in 2013 in response to the Affordable Care Act, and we have essentially been amending it every year in response to federal guidance that comes out annually. Largely, comes out annually. I'll just stop there. Last year's annual update was paused because of COVID, and essentially this rule is resurrecting that. This presentation is probably going to try to cover all 4 of the parts that are in front of the committee right now. The rule itself is an 8-part rule, but the revisions that are needed at this time are only for 4 of those parts, which are parts 1, 5, 7, and 8. A little bit of how we got here. We started the rulemaking with the pre-filing with LCAR back in January and went before LCAR in February. We then filed with the Secretary of State in February, and on April 6th, we had a public hearing. We did not get anyone in attendance at that public hearing. The deadline for the comments was then the following week, April 13th. We did not receive any comments to parts 1, 5, or 8, but we did get one comment from Vermont Legal Aid to part 7. Then after that, of course, we then filed with the Secretary of State and with this committee. That was on June 4th. A little bit of overview of what the changes are that we're making. These changes are necessary to align these 4 parts with federal and state law and guidance. It includes also some technical corrections and some improvements for clarity. Most of the revisions on this round are a result of the transitioning of premium processing for QHPs away from the agency to the QHP carriers. Qualified health plan issuers are now going to be doing premium processing. This is a legislative mandate, and the rules are aligning with that transition. And as we do that, as we pulled those rules out for the qualified health plans, we also modified the surviving rules as they apply to Medicaid. We also made revisions here, just to point out a few, in connection with the special enrollment period that's available for qualified health plans. We wanted to add rules to align with the federal law. And then this was also the place where Vermont Legal Aid had commented, and in response to their comment, between the proposed rule and the final one that you're seeing now, we added another special enrollment period. And that one was tied to the COBRA, what we wanted to make sure was available to individuals if COBRA ceases, giving somebody a special enrollment period into the qualified health plan. So you'll see that one change as being different between the proposed and the final that's in front of you. And we also have one new change that we would like the committee to consider. On Tuesday, we submitted a memo through Charlene. I don't know if that is in front of you or not, but just a little bit of what's going on there. Over the past week, we've talked with Legislative Counsel, Jennifer Carby. She had a few questions that we responded to, and she made a comment in connection with the definition of Medicaid services. That's in part 1 under section 3. And she pointed out in her comment that considering the text of that particular provision, we should be using the word rules instead of regulations. And we agree with her. And we thought for efficiency, with your permission, we would just make that change when we go to file the adopted rules. So that's what the memo is that we're asking you to also consider today. I don't really think I have my, well, let me talk a little bit about budget. I mean, we think this is all budget neutral. Nothing here is unique for the rule. We're just bringing the rule into alignment with law. We don't see any economic impact for any of the revisions that we're proposing. Public comment and public engagement, just to mention that a little bit, because it's always been important to us right from the beginning of HBEE to engage the public and have them participate. And this rule is no different. We talked very closely with the qualified health plan issuers to get on board with this transition. We engage always with Vermont Legal Aid and respect their feedback. We went before the Medicaid and Exchange Advisory Committee so that they knew what was going on here. And the agency has something called the Global Commitment Register, which is where we post all proposals. It's got a wide subscriber list, and we gave opportunity for anyone to comment through that path. And that's where we are today. So what we are hoping for from the committee is approval of what's in front of you, as well as this new amendment. And if that is appropriate, then we are hoping to file the adopted sometime in August. Our goal is to have everything in effect by October 1, which aligns with the legislation for the premium transitioning, and also aligns with our annual open enrollment for QHPs for 2022. So thank you to the committee, and Sean, Danny and I are available for questions if you have any. Great. Sorry.
Are there no questions for the witness? Senator Lyons.
You know, I do have questions, but they probably dip into the policy. But the one, starting with, some of them do, some of them don't. On page 13 of 05, PO5, that you have Indian, and I think that is instead of Native American, and I believe, is that a federal issue, that the federal government uses the term Indian? Are we allowed to change that to Native American?
We can certainly explore that. It is aligning with the terms used at the federal level, but I can certainly put that on my radar to explore revising that throughout this rule, as we do ongoing rulemaking. I can take a look at that, Senator.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you. I do have a couple of other questions. I'm not seeing well today, so please bear with me. On page 35.
And I'm sorry, part 5 again.
Yes, it is. It's just, I have questions on all of them, but I won't go through all of them. I think that I can probably get those answered outside of rules. There's a, oh shoot, I think it's in the annotated version. Won't take long. Yeah, in the annotated version on page 35, number 4, you've crossed out the providing information about and facilitate employers' establishment of various plans. So who will be doing that if the duties of the navigator have been changed?
Oh, I'm sorry, that might be, is that part 1? I'm sorry, I'm trying to orient.
I'm on page 35 of part 1
Okay,
of the annotated version. And it's a section that's been number 4,
yes.
Duties of a navigator. Number 4 has been crossed out. And
Yes.
so then.
Yes, and that aligns with state statute. So at the statutory level, that got deleted. So the rule is aligning with that. And I'm not able right now to answer your focus question. I don't know, Sean Sheehan, in your role, that would be something that would have hit your radar. And if not, we can get back to you, Senator. But
Okay,
the revision here is to align with the statute.
Okay, is it
certainly.
something then that the carriers will be doing?
Yeah, I think we can get back on the specifics of the piece there, which will be done. But right, the changes to the piece talking about what the navigators will do are to be consistent with both the change in statute, as well as over the years, there's been changes from the federal government's expectations of the duties that navigators should perform. So this is
okay. I don't want to dip too far down. I understand how difficult this is to coordinate everything. Really appreciate the work that you have done. And then I do have, I'm going to ask a couple other questions that may or may not be answered. on page 10 of the annotated version, it says under the age of 18. And I understand that this is both federal and state. I don't think you can answer this question, but it's for all of us to consider as we raise the age for judicial proceedings, the implications of that. I'd probably none. I think Jen Carby probably can help me with that. And then on page 8, quickly, I'm going backwards.
Yep, that's okay. Thank you. I'm following. Thank you.
Yep. So a catastrophic plan must include coverage for 3 primary care visits per year. That's not a change. So that's going to stay the same. So just confirming that.
Correct. The definition of catastrophic plan in section 3 on page 8 has no revisions in this rulemaking.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
correct.
Then
And Sean, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry,
Nope,
Senator.
go ahead.
Sean,
Sorry.
anything you'd want to say on catastrophic plans or?
No, just.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Then in the protected income level, so there's nothing in our current law or in our agreement with the federal government that allows for an increase, a CPI. So the protected income level is stationary depending on the federal guidelines. Is that right?
Like, let me chew on that a bit.
It's based on our poverty level.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's exactly right.
And so there's nothing in either federal or state law that allows for flexibility for increasing protected income by a metric such as the CPI.
So outside of any annual adjustment, do we have flexibility to move the pill to something else? No.
Yes.
We would
Okay.
not. That's right.
All right.
That's tied to,
thank you.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's it. That's it. I'll try not to be so ask these kinds of questions going forward, but I do have those questions on each one of the rules that you've presented, but thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure, of course.
Are we looking at all the rules, Mr. Chair, right now?
Would a question I ask myself, if we were to go from rule to rule to rule with the testimony, we'd probably still have to come back and vote them one at a time. So what's the committee's pleasure on this? Well, hearing.
I'd say that we have Jen Carby here, and she's gone through all of the rules and worked with AHS and maybe relying on her memo to us along with Anthea Dexter Cooper's analysis. I think it's fine.
So we would go through each of the rules and then take them up at the end. Is that what you're suggesting, Senator Lyons?
Yep.
Okay.
And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on each of the rules, frankly.
So hearing no objection, that's what we will do. So on this rule, before we move along, there was a question about the interpretation of Indian versus Native American. Or have we got and received assurance from that if the federal guidelines do not require the word Indian, it shall be replaced with Native American? Is that the understanding of this one?
So I certainly am happy to explore that. We had looked at it earlier in one of the prior years of updating, and sitting here right now, I can't remember what caused that barrier from moving that forward, but I'll be happy to resurrect it and take another look.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which would then have us move along to 21P06. Financial Methodologies. Ms. Chapman, are you going to start us out on that?
I can, the presentation was kind of running all through all four of the rules. So I have nothing new to add, but certainly I'm glad to answer any questions of what is going on in that particular part.
Okay,
Senator Lyons, continue, please.
okay, I think that the number of questions diminishes going forward, but on page 46, okay, number 13, the financial methodologies allow for the use of grants and so on for educational purposes. Is there an allowance for saving money for educational purposes? Can they have an educational fund, one that might be allowed by federal or state government to use for educational purposes, or is it simply, does that count as a grant?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm just catching up with you. So we're talking about for our Medicaid for age blind and disabled, there's certain forms of unearned income that's excluded from being counted. And you're pointing out the one that's talking about grants and scholarships that are used to pay tuition.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, now that I'm oriented, can you ask again? Sorry.
Sure, I will. I know I can't remember the name of the fund, but I know that the state allows for a certain savings for education for the, and in this case, could be for someone who's disabled.
Yep.
It would that fund be allowed for these folks as as a grant or scholarship?
So
it's more of a policy question. I don't know how that would be counted.
Yeah, and I think again, something we'd be glad to connect the dots to. I mean, in the world of Medicaid for age blind and disabled, there's a number of opportunities to exclude income, earned and unearned, and some are mandated through the federal, and the state of Vermont has done some of its own expansions of income exclusions. Right. And this one that you're pointing out is certainly making it clear that if your income that comes in is specific for tuition, then it can't be used to meet your day-to-day needs. So we shouldn't be counting it against you. And that's some of the theory behind some of those exclusions.
Right.
If they can't be for your food, clothing, shelter, then we shouldn't be considering it countable income. But I don't know the program specifically you're referring to, but again, glad to look at it. And, and if it's not automatically,
I think it's a tax deduction. Is it a tax deduction? Senator McDonald, you may be more familiar with I'm trying to remember what the name of that fund is, but thank you. It seems to me that it would not count against the individual if it's a dedicated fund for education. It's just not defined as a grant, I don't think.
Yep, fair enough.
The savings.
And then, yes, for the other side of the Medicaid house that gets tested using taxable income, that would have its own analysis, ensuring that it's not taxable. That would be the catch over on that side.
All right. What number are we? Are we on? We're not on part 7 yet, are we? No, I'm all finished with that one. Part 6, number 6, part 5.
So Senator Lyons, where are we here?
Well, I don't have any more questions on the part 5.
Which leaves us with.
I do have questions on part 6.
Looks like my camera froze. Okay.
So we're looking at a package of 5, 6, 7, and 8 right now. And we're going to move along and then come back and vote on them one after another. Is that what you're recommending, Senator Lyons?
Yeah, yes, I am. And I would be happy to ask my questions on part 7 to keep us moving along.
Okay, then go ahead.
All right, on page 44 of the annotated version, there is a section crossed out, F, 3F. Of notification each time a premium amount is recalculated. Is that going to happen somewhere else? I mean, will people be notified?
Yes. So some of what happens in the annotated is it gets moved to another spot. And I think for the Medicaid premiums, it's still in there.
Okay.
I think the cross out just is it's part of how the whole track changes works.
Huh, okay. I just didn't see it. So, but thank you. So it is moved somewhere else.
So just to double check, it was the old F. Danny, do you happen to have that up that you can look at that annotated?
If you go to the, and Danny, if you go to the page prior to the one that you're looking at, Senator Lyons, I think that language is up.
There it is.
Oh, good. Okay.
3.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, terrific.
Good.
This may be the case with the next 2 questions. I'm going to page 48. Yeah, I mean, these 2 sections on page 48 and 49 that have been totally redacted, is that or eliminated? Are those then moved other places or consolidated? I'm looking. Yeah.
So these are the rules on the late payment grace period, and the redactions are because the rule talked about QHPs, qualified health plans, and we're not going to be in the business of that. So that all comes out and sits now with the insurance carriers.
Got it.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we'll see new rules from DFR regarding the insurance carriers.
I'm going to defer to Sean on where that might show up, the grace period rules on the qualified health plan. Sean, do you happen, is that how that's going to play out when it moves? Do you know?
Well, I'll have to confirm that piece. I know that we have had those conversations with with DFR and with the insurance issuers and the rules here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be a concern, I think, if we take this all out and then we're left with nothing until as new rules are put in place. We're just assuming that folks will be following the right rules. The insurance.
And on the grace period, I believe it's still, I have to check the actual piece. I believe it's still in the HBE rule because that part actually isn't changing. It's still, I could look here to find the exact page, but my understanding is still in the rule here because that part isn't changing. The issuers have been responsible for the late notices, the grace period notices since the beginning, the last 8 years. It's been their responsibility to do dunning and terminations. What's changed and what these rules reflect is that instead of the issuers asking permission to send the grace period and getting the information from DIVA, who has had the information on who has paid, now the issuers have the information on who has paid. So the requirements stay the same way they are in the rules as far as the number of grace period notices, how much time between notice and termination and so forth, and that's distinct for people who receive subsidies and people who are unsubsidized. All of that is mandated in federal rule and reflected here as well. So the part that's changing is just the information flow that then triggers those notifications.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just what, I'm sorry, just one thing to clear up, the surviving rule at 64.06, which is what you're looking at, Senator, we are not going to have the QHP grace period information in there. So what's going to only survive is the grace periods for Medicaid. But all the QHP related grace periods are being deleted from our body of rules because they're tied to premiums around QHPs, and we're getting rid of all rules tied to the premium processing, including that grace period part.
So then a quick question about that. Are the grace periods in state statute or?
For
Yes.
qualified health plans?
Yes, so they cannot change. I saw Jen Carby somewhere
Yep.
shaking her head, yes. So those grace periods can't change without a statutory, without a legislative change.
Jen Carby, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Jennifer Carby, Legislative Counsel. Senator Lyons, there's actually a provision added in legislation this year in Act 25, which was the big DFR bill, that was specifically looking at grace periods for comprehensive major medical plans, which is what qualified health plans are. So I think that is to address in part the removal of this from the HBEE rule, because it would no longer fall within DIVA's jurisdiction, and DFR had asked to make sure it was in the statute.
Good.
Okay, golly, okay, all the more reason for us to ensure that there's an integration of oversight of this between those committees of jurisdiction. That my opinion, sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, I think that probably does it. I was going to ask a question about on page 62, the premium payment, but I think, but that's a Medicaid premium payment. That would have page 62 4F. Would that have been integrated somewhere else in the rules that I might have overlooked? I mean, I did read all these, but after a while you forget to double check.
No, that definitely is deleted and will not appear anywhere else because it's about qualified health plan premiums. So it is not going to survive in HBEE.
All right, but that will then show up in DFR rules relating to qualified health plans within the private insurers.
I'm not sure that the DFR, at least by statute, gets into quite that much detail. But I believe they have existing processes around what happens when people fail to pay premium and what happens. We can follow up with them if there are concerns about holes.
Well, I just want to make sure that there is some continuity and some alignment between what Medicaid is doing and what our qualified health plans are doing. The more we align, the less difficult it is for people and for administrators. That's all. And but that's a policy question.
Yeah, I think on that alignment, I mean, I can say, I think twofold. One, I think the changes in the rules for statute, and as was discussed on the DFR side and here, was to ensure that continuity between what's happened over the last few years and going forward, which they're reflected from the member side. That continuity will stay and there won't be a shift because they have, on the QHP side, have been getting those grace period notices, the dunning and termination notices from the issuers, and that will continue based on the same cadence. Okay. And I think the rules change had reflected that. As far as the symmetry that you referenced between the Medicaid and the QHP side, that certainly is ideal. It's not always the case because of the difference in federal rules. And so that's kind of been a recurring theme, right, over the years, the amount of days people have to be granted, the number of notices, all that's written in federal law and varies from not just from Medicaid to QHP, but as I mentioned, from QHP subsidized to QHP unsubsidized, and there's not a lot of latitude that the state has within that side. But certainly agree with your sentiment that the more symmetry, the better from the members.
Oh, yeah. That's music to my ears, and our committee frequently is talking about this type of alignment. It's difficult to do, just as a comment for those of you who are in finance. It's really difficult to do when you have a split between what occurs in health and welfare and what occurs in the finance committee. So the alignment gets unaligned, but we're going to keep working on it. We've been working on it for a while, frustrating as it may seem, but we do it. So thank you.
So, Senator Lyons, with the testimony of the recent witnesses, are you satisfied that while there have been changes and realignments, they have been compensated for accurately in the rules before us?
Yes, I am, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fine with all the rules through. I don't have any questions. Apparently, I didn't write any questions down for 08. So maybe I will just double check. No, I think I'm fine. I'm good.
Would you recommend that we vote on the 5, 6, 7, and 8 at this time?
I would move that we vote on rules P21, 21P 05, 6, 7, and 8. But I think there were some proposed changes that came to us from Anthea Dexter Cooper, and probably with Jen Carby involved as well. So I think we should look at that first. Yeah.
Regulations was going to be supplanted with rules, and I think it was at 5.
Yep.
Yep.
You got it.
Yep.
Any others?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
So,
all right. So that I would move that with that change from regulation to rules, that in 05, that we approve the rules as presented.
all 4?
All 4.
Okay.
05 through 08.
Senator Lyons has moved with the change from rules to regulations to rules in 05, that the 4 rules 05, 06, 07, 08 be approved. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in
favor? We're going to have a
favor?
quiz next week on this.
I'll go rock climbing first. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. And LCAR has approved 05, 06, 07, and 08, which brings us to 21P09, Agency of Human Services, Home Health Services. And this time the witness is Ashley Berliner, Director of Medical Policy, Agency of Human Services. Ms. Berliner.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms.
Sorry.
The floor is yours.
Great. I'm Ashley Berliner, the Director of Medicaid Policy. Thank you for having me today. I'm here to discuss 4 rules proposed under the Healthcare Administrative Rule Framework, HCAR. I've been here on several occasions in the past to talk about HCAR and how we are slowly migrating all of the DVA covered services rules and other Medicaid rules across the Agency of Human Services under one healthcare administrative rule framework that has similar style and is consistent and updated. Some of the rules that exist across the Medicaid agency haven't been updated in over 30 years. So this is a long-term project to update them. And it's been a little while since I've seen you guys. so I just wanted to give a little refresher. Today, I'll be talking about 4 rules. 3 are amended rules: the Home Health Services Rule, durable medical equipment, and medical supplies. And 1 is a brand new rule on applied behavioral analysis services. There's no economic impact anticipated for any of these rules, and the changes and amendments reflect current practice and coverage for Vermont Medicaid. Rules were shared with stakeholders, including all of the AHS departments and external partners, including the Medicaid and Exchange Advisory Board, Vermont Legal Aid, the Visiting Nurses Association, the Homes Group, DME providers, and an autism work group that is cross-departmental with advocates, families, and providers. A virtual public hearing was held on April 7th, 2021. And since filing the proposed rules, we didn't make any substantive changes to the home health and ABA rules in response to comment. We did make, non-substantive changes in response to comments from Legislative Council. I believe you have received a note related to that, and they're indicated in gray and bolded in your annotated rules. So with that overview, I can go into 2.231, the Home Health Services Rule. Does that work for you, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. So this rule was amended in response to federal policy changes to 42 CFR 440.70 made during the COVID-19 public health emergency, and we're now making them permanent. So they were temporary changes. We're now making them permanent through this rulemaking. The rule was amended to expand providers able to order home health services and conduct face-to-face visits. Previously, only a physician was allowed to authorize these, and now we've expanded it to allow nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, and physician's assistants, expanding the qualified providers who can order home health services for Medicaid beneficiaries. It also aligns Medicaid ordering providers with Medicare requirements. References throughout the rule to medical supplies and durable medical equipment were removed as they're specified in separate HCAR rules. Since the final adopting rule, 2 non-substantive changes were made to clarify in response to comment for Legislative Council, as I said previously. And we did not receive any public comments on this rule. Any questions?
Any questions on this one? Senator Lyons?
Actually, I'm trying to remember that this may be a question for Ledge Council, but it's also for Ashley on the expansion of beyond the physician to the nurse practitioner and others, advanced practice nurse and others. Is that it? Did we put that in statute, Jen? As I read it, I felt, oh yes, this meets statutory requirements. I just want to confirm that. Indeed,
I'm not sure that this was a specific, that this particular provision was in response to a legislative change. There have been a number of places in statute where the legislature has changed from physician to broader medical professionals. But I don't think there was anything in statute that specified physician in this instance. So I think that may be something within Diva's discretion to change potentially in response to federal law. But I would defer to Ashley on the impetus for the particular change.
That's exactly right, Jen. It is a response to loosening of federal requirements that took place under the public health emergency, and then the federal government extended those.
Just like buprenorphine. They've done. So good, thank you. No further questions from me.
So Senator Lyons, would you recommend we go on to 10?
I would recommend we move right along.
Okay. 21P10, durable medical equipment section.
So this was also amended as a result of federal policy made in response to the public health emergency that are now permanent. And it also amended to expand the providers able to order durable medical equipment and conduct face-to-face visits from only a physician being authorized previously to now allowing nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, and physician assistants. Additionally, it amends to clarify federal requirements that items of durable medical equipment are not restricted to items covered by Medicare, and services are not restricted to beneficiaries who are homebound. This is not a change from current policy, but we wanted to be explicit about that in our rulemaking.
Senator Lyons.
A very quick question. And Ashley, or maybe Jen, you know the answer. I think Medicare Part D, does Medicare Part D also cover durable medical equipment, or is that separate? Okay, don't answer that.
I don't think I think it's specific to prescription drugs, but I would have to look. DME is pretty
so
different.
as well, but then I heard something that made me think differently, but I won't ask the question now.
I can look.
Yeah, we'll look at that another day. But is this consistent with what is happening, the durable medical equipment rule now consistent with, it's federal, but is it consistent with Medicare as well? Or is it simply our Medicaid rule?
The Medicaid rules are more lenient than the Medicare rules when it comes to both home health and durable medical equipment.
Of
coverage.
course, because you don't need as much. I'm sorry.
Well, states are footing half the bill.
I'm fine with this one, Mr. Chair, unless someone else has questions. I would say we move along.
Any questions on P10, durable medical equipment? If not, we'll continue with 21P11. Ashley Berliner. I think you're muted, Ms. Berliner.
Thank you. You'd think I would learn that after a year and a half of doing this. So this rule was amended from a Medicaid covered services rule 7504, last adopted in 1999. It was updated and amended to be consistent with LCAR and align with federal regulations. The amendments include removing the specific lists of items covered without prior authorization. This list is subject to change and is better suited for provider manual and the fee schedule rather than being codified in rule. It also includes broad categories of covered services maintained in the rule for clarity, but it's not exhaustive, and the detailed lists are within the provider manuals and fee schedules available on the detailed website.
Senator Lyons.
Yeah, I'm looking at 11, and I'm realizing that we skipped over some information on 09 that we probably will get back to when we look at when we get to the end. But anyway, I'm fine with this one. I'm going back to medical supplies, and I'm looking at the Vermont Legal Aid letter. Were modifications made to durable medical equipment and the letter from Vermont Legal Aid, or is that part of the memo that we have for changes going forward? This is
no changes were made in response to comments received from legal aid. We did make changes for clarity in response to comments received from Legislative Council.
Okay, so you made comment, right? Okay, that's good. Okay, we can. Well, let's go ahead, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to stop us here unless somebody else has questions.
Any further questions from LCAR members on 011? 11. If not, 21P12.
So this is a new rule on applied behavior analysis services, and it outlines DIVA's covered services for ABA, applied behavioral analysis. It largely reflects the previously posted ABA policy, which has been in effect since 2015. Revisions were made to be consistent with HCAR language and formatting, and the outline of the rule has requirements of the ABA program, identifying which services are covered and not covered, what the provider requirements are, and the Medicaid beneficiary requirements.
I do have two questions.
Senator Lyons.
Okay. So I'm going to page 2. I think it's page 2. E, medically stable, not require 24-hour medical, and so on, in a hospital level of care on an ongoing basis. This is under the eligibility of care for ABA services. So applied behavioral analysis services would not, this is a question, would not include a secure facility, either in a hospital or elsewhere.
This rule specifically covers ABA services provided in a home or community-based setting, so it does not provide for institutional coverage.
But it does say it's a hospital level of care, but it is in the home.
It does not. The idea is that it is not a hospital level of, that the individual does not need a hospital level of care.
I'm looking at E on page 2.
Yes. So the requirement is that they're medically stable and do not require a hospital level of care.
Got it. Okay. All right. Okay. But this is only for behavioral analysis. It's not, doesn't include.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Then non-covered services on page 2, respite care, of course, is always a concern. And then outside a community setting will not authorize for any of the following. So there's no reimbursement for respite care. And there's no reimbursement for anyone living outside a community setting, which would mean a hospital or other institution.
That's correct.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about respite care? Is that something directed by the state or the federal government?
Respite is something that's available to individuals on waivers through our 1115 waiver. You have to meet a particular level of care to receive respite. It's not available through our normal Medicaid program as a covered service. It really requires that institutional level of care need. So many individuals do receive respite and also receive ABA. Respite is provided by lay people. ABA requires a licensed and certified skilled provider. So we want to clarify that individuals who are receiving ABA are actually receiving the behavioral analysis intervention and not just receiving ABA in lieu of respite services that they're not otherwise eligible for.
Yes, we did. And we had a very short conversation about this yesterday in our Child Protection Oversight Committee meeting. About we heard from DCF about the need for respite care for foster families who are trained to care for more difficult situations, but also I would think that might extend to ABA. So that this is an area that is a policy area for discussion. But thank you. I don't have any other questions on that, Mr. Chair.
Does the committee have any other questions on 21P12? So which would we have a package of 4 here. Senator Lyons said that she had questions on the first of this 4 of this package that she hadn't asked and wished to go back to. So that would be back to
It was on the durable medical equipment and medical supplies, and I was just looking at the, I was looking at the legal aid letter that, information that came along, and their suggestion was to strike the language in the rules and to add 3708 of the CARES Act, language from the CARES Act. And my question is for Ashley Berliner as to the rationale for continuing with the rules rather than taking that recommendation from legal aid. I don't know the answer.
So they asked that DIVA near Medicare requirements, which are less expansive than Medicaid, and expressed concern that it would be confusing for providers if Medicaid was different than Medicare. It's DIVA's position that we do not want to limit it to the floor of the Medicare requirements and want to stick with a more expansive group of providers.
Well, with that in mind and thinking about a previous conversation, then will the qualified health plans be more restrictive?
This rule does not affect qualified health plans.
No, it doesn't. But once everything is shifted over to the private insurers, and that's another policy question. I hope, Jen, you're listening and help me with this. But okay.
any comments, Ms. Carby?
I would just echo Ashley that this is wholly separate from the qualified health plan. So if there's interest in requiring certain benefits in qualified health plans, that's another story that also involves the state defrayal of the cost. So there's a monetary aspect to that.
And that would be a future committee of jurisdiction to make recommendations on that.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay. What did we have a memo from Jen Carby or Anthea Dexter Cooper on these rules at all?
Hello.
Anthea, Ms. Dexter Cooper.
Anthea is perfect. So you have from me an email that just sort of summarized some of the changes. So on 2 of the rules, AHS is proposing modifications, and those were provided in email from Charlene, and they had a marked up version, and that is going to be 21-P09 and 21-P12. And then in my email, you have 2 revisions on 21-P10 that Jen and the agency worked out, and that's in 4.209D, a small change there, and 4.209 subsection F, a small change there. And both of those are in my email. It includes moving what was subdivision D3 up to subsection D, and then in F, swapping rental requirements for items of DME for rented DME. And those are changes that the agency is proposing, and I just put them in writing so you would have them.
So I'm going to suggest when we vote on these, we go back to our traditional way of taking them one at a time, and ask that Anthea, as we take up each one of those, remind us at that time of which of the provisions she emailed us a couple days ago for each as we go along.
Sure, I can do that.
So we were still discussing them as a package, but if there are no further questions, we'll go back and vote on them individually.
So I would like to move that we act on 21P09 on home health services as proposed and amended. Okay.
Anthea, you.
Senator Lyons got it. It's from the agency's proposal dated June 23rd of 2021.
Okay. So 21P09 has been moved that we approve with the additions in the memo that we got from Antia, as just explained. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. And we have approved 21P09, which brings us to 21P10, Agency of Human Services Durable Medical Equipment.
So I'd like to move 21P10 durable medical equipment as proposed. I don't think there are amendments, changes to this one. Anthea, is that correct?
No, this is the one that has the 2 in my email on.
Oh, it's got the, okay, thank you. As proposed in the email from our Ledge Council.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sarah Lyons has moved that 21P10 be approved with the additions in the Ledge Council has sent us in the email, in our emails. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay, and the committee has approved 21P10. 21P11, dealing with medical, human services and medical supplies.
I would like to propose that we vote favorably on 21P11 as proposed, and Anthea.
And there are no modifications to
No
this one.
changes to this one.
Yeah,
That's
this is the one that
okay,
is
thank you.
stayed the same.
This is the
throughout.
only clean one in the group.
Sarah Lyons has proposed that we approve 21P11, dealing with medical supplies with no amendments, changes. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those all opposed say nay, and 21P11 has been approved. 21P12, Agency of Human Services Applied Behavior Analysis.
So I'd like to move that we act favorably on 21P12, Applied Behavior Analysis Services with proposed changes as described by Anthea Dexter Cooper in her email.
Sarah Lyons has moved that we approve 21P12 with the changes set forth in the memo sent to us by our Legislative Council. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have approved P21, P12, 21P12 on applied behavior analysis. And Sarah Lyons, we often send letters to committees of jurisdiction when we think there are dangling part of policy issues associated, but you have, as a chair, are you prepared to take those back to your committee for future?
As long as Jen Carby has been listening, I do have some ideas to take back to committee. Good. But it won't be just back to our committee, Senator. It will also be back to finance. I think there's a broader discussion here about coordination and alignment of our healthcare programs generally. So having two committees act separately, and maybe we don't want to see these things pulled apart. That's all I'm saying. When you have,
so if you are,
yeah.
if you're satisfied that it's going to get back to the healthcare committee, we can.
It will, and the Chair of Finance does sit on healthcare, so we should have an opportunity for a discussion, as we have in the past. So great.
Senator Bray.
So I'm just wondering aloud, it seems on the Senate side, we're a relatively small team and we wear more than one hat. So we have that, naturally that word gets back, but I'm just wondering about on the House side, if the formality of a letter is helpful so that both bodies stay in sync.
We could, the Healthcare Committee in the House does deal with all of this. It's not bifurcated. So
we don't have anyone on LCAR that is a direct pipeline. Would you, Senator Lyons, wish to work with Jen Carby to put together a memo to send to both committees on behalf of LCAR of issues?
Yes. That'd be helpful. I think the biggest one, of course, is alignment between Medicaid and the QHPs as things are moved from one place to the next. But and so much of that, though, is dependent on federal law. But then I did raise some questions that are really internal state issues.
So for
yeah,
would you work with Ms. Carby to have such a letter that we could take a look at it at our next meeting and send to the committee's jurisdiction memo? So
happy to.
And we will look forward to that at our next meeting. Any Charlene, can you fill us in on our schedule for our next meeting 2 weeks hence and the changes that we can expect?
So the next meeting is July 15th. It's going to be in room 11 in the State House. There's going to be 2 rules. You haven't gotten those yet. I haven't sent them out. I'll be sending those out today. One of them is the VOSHA Review Board Rules of Procedure, and the other one is an emergency rule from the Department of Financial Regulation, access to healthcare services during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there will only be 2 rules for the first in-person meeting at the State House starting at 10.
Okay. Senator Bray.
Mr. Chair, I can't remember if it's been so long. When we meet in person, do we start a little later to allow people to travel? Do we have a 10 o'clock start usually?
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent, appropriate question. We traditionally meet from 10 until noon at the State House, and would you recommend, Senator Bray, that we re-adopt that schedule? And
sure. I mean, I know everyone wants to get a good early start on the day, but for thinking, especially for Representative Bongartz, he has a pretty long haul to get to Montpelier. So
I know Representative Higley had requested we meet as soon as possible, which was under Zoom. We were able to step that up an hour. But Representative Higley.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that as well. That's helped me out quite a bit with my work schedule. So appreciate the earlier for this time anyway.
Okay, so in the absence, hearing no objection, we will change the schedule from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock. Charlene will notify all those who need to be notified of the schedule change and timing, and we will revert to the 10 to 11. Hence, 12. To 12.
Yeah.
I was just trying to sneak it in there a little shorter. 10 to 12. Anything else that needs to come before the committee before we adjourn? Senator Bray.
So one thing, this may be there's a lot of Olympic trials going on right now, so I'm very conscious of personal bests. This might be an LCAR personal best. We approved 9 rules today. I don't think I've ever been through so many in a day. But knowing my cue from the chair, I would move that we adjourn.
Senator Bray has moved that LCAR adjourn until the 15th of July, when we will meet in person at 10 o'clock in room 11. Senator Lyons.
I just want to say that Charlene is going to be adding a little quiz onto our agenda next time on all the rules that we looked at today, including the water rules. So, but no, the rules. The reason we passed those rules so quickly today is that they were to a great extent technical corrections, and to also without controversy. But they are very complex, some of them.
Thank you for your work today, Senator Lyons. It's not,
well,
those are tough ones to keep track of.
Here.
A few gems in lengthy material. So it's been moved that we adjourn. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay, and we are adjourned. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.